FERPA Exceptions. We're about to deep dive into FERPA exceptions. But before we do, let's do a quick recap of FERPA law so that we understand why these exceptions exist. FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, grants three main rights to parents of minors and students who have turned 18. First, they have the right to access their students' educational records. Second, they have the right to seek to amend those educational records. Third, they have the right to consent to disclose their students' personally identifiable information. This last one about the right to consent to disclose information is where FERPA exceptions come into play. As an LEA, or local educational agency, you have a lot of student information, also known as PII, personally identifiable information. Are we done with the acronyms? Oh, we are. Good. You're entrusted with this student information, and so you should only share it with others with written parental consent or by using one or more of the FERPA exceptions. Exceptions, times where you can share student PII without parental consent. There are several FERPA exceptions, but we're going to focus right now on some of the main ones. Auditor evaluation, school official, directory information, and studies. Let's talk about each of these in detail. Audit or evaluation. Politicians, am I right? First, they mandate that you follow a certain program, and then they ask for data to verify the effectiveness of said program? It's almost like they think they're the government or something. This exception refers specifically to the audit or evaluation of a federal or state-supported education program, or to enforce or comply with federal legal requirements related to that program, whether they give you money or not. Then they may have to give some access to student PII if the mandate requires it for the purpose of audit or evaluation. But let me let you in on a little secret. The state or federal government doesn't have to initiate the audit or evaluation. You can do it yourself, so long as it's of a state or federal program. But just a reminder, it's only for the state you live in and for the federal government that you're accountable to. If China calls you up on the phone, you don't have to give them anything. I'll never make that mistake again. Similar to other exceptions with FERPA, there are some requirements for sharing the data correctly. First, the entity receiving the data has to be either a state or local educational authority or the authorized representative of such an authority. Second, a written agreement has to be in place that ensures that the data are only used for the authorized purpose. That means there has to be protections against unauthorized redisclosure. And the receiving entity also has to destroy the data once it is no longer needed for the audit or evaluation. Here's an example for you. Say you're receiving funds from the federal government for running Title I programs. In this case, you may enter into a written agreement with an authorized representative to share the PII with them for the purpose of an audit or evaluation without written parental consent. So remember, if there's no federal or state requirement, then you wouldn't use this exception. Oh, that's so good. Studies exception. Has this ever happened to you? Hello, who is this? Oh, hi, Bob, the researcher. How's the family? Are you publishing or perishing, Bob? What's that? You're interested in some educational data about that product our students are using? Oh yes, Bob, we would love to give you so much student personally identifiable information. Does FERPA allow this? You should never give student personally identifiable information to a researcher just because they ask, even if they say please. If an LEA wants to have a study done, they can contract with a researcher and even share student personally identifiable information without written parental consent using the studies exception. That is, provided a few conditions are met. The study must be done for or on the educational entity's behalf and for an educational purpose. FERPA specifically mentions, how did you do that? That was magic. FERPA specifically mentions 3 purposes. 1, to develop, validate, or administer predictive tests. 2, to administer student aid programs. 3, to improve instruction. The data can only be shared with a written agreement in place that specifies the purpose, scope, and duration of the study, what data are to be shared, that the data shared can only be used for the purposes of the study. They can't be using that data for some other side research they got. If it's not for you, they can't do it. And that the data must be destroyed at the request of the educational entity or after the study is done. For example, let's say your district is invested in some reading software and you want to know just how effective that reading software is. Now, the reading software isn't a part of a federal or state mandate, so the auditor evaluation exception would not apply. But the studies exception would, since the purpose is to improve instruction. You could contract with a local researcher, perhaps at, I don't know, a university, and create a written agreement for sharing that data. And remember, researcher calls you, you call the researcher, doesn't matter. Question is it for or on your behalf? For your behalf or on your behalf? That is the question. Directory information. You know, sometimes I like to break out the old yearbook and reminisce about the good old days. That guy still owes me money. Oh no. Oh no. Student pictures, student names, participation in officially recognized sports and activities. This is all PII! But yearbooks like this are actually okay, thanks to the FERPA Directory Information Exception. Directory information is information about a student that generally wouldn't be considered harmful or an invasion of privacy if disclosed. Examples might include a student's name, gender, birth date, picture, or many others. You know, there are many situations where a school might want to make this information public, such as a playbill for the school play, the names, height, and weight of an athlete in a sporting event, a list of student names for Valentine's Day, or photos in a school yearbook. You get the idea. Directory information has no requirement for the school to control the information once it's been shared. Once it's out there, it's out there. It's important to remember that directory information, it's going to be different from one LEA to another LEA. It's even going to be different from one school to another school within the same LEA. And that's because each LEA and school gets to decide what they have designated as directory information. Now that you know what it is, here are the rules. Rule number 1, don't feed your directory information after midnight. Wait, what's that? That's the plot of Gremlins? What about the water stuff? Okay, that's also Gremlins. Okay, my mistake. Rule number 1, educational entities must provide parents with an annual notification of what types of data they have designated as directory information. Note that FERPA allows you to go beyond this and have a limited directory information policy, where you would indicate specifically who you'll be sharing the data with and for what purposes. Either way, parents must be given the option to opt out of directory information being shared. And the annual notice needs to include the time frame that parents have to opt out. But that means that if a parent has opted their student out of directory information, then they shouldn't appear in any publications that use directory information, like a yearbook. Sorry, Sally, you'll just be known as no photo available till the end of time. This will require that LEAs and schools have some sort of way of tracking opt-outs to ensure that student data are being shared correctly. Because of these opt-outs, there are many situations where you may be sharing essentially directory information, but you may not want to use that exception. For example, an online educational app might only require a student's name to create an account. Harmless, right? But if the parents have opted out, then the student wouldn't be able to use that app in class. That's why for educational apps, you'll most likely want to use the school official exception and not directory information. So to summarize, annual notification, allow the parents the option to opt out. But you don't have to take my word for it. Just take a look. It's in a book. A reading rainbow. School School officials! School officials includes teachers and other individuals working within an educational agency that have a legitimate educational interest in the student. Please note that just because someone's a teacher, it doesn't mean they have a legitimate educational interest. Gossiping or venting about students in the faculty lounge would not fall under this exception. Hey, you know Johnny in my third period class? You know, the one with ADHD? Oh, he was such a terror in class today. I tried calling his parents, but they don't care. Hey, are you gonna finish that Danish? School official may also include contractors, volunteers, or other parties the school has outsourced work to, provided the following conditions are met. Number 1, a school official must be performing an educational function that the school would otherwise use its employees for. Number 2, you must maintain direct control over the personally identifiable information. This includes even when it's in the third party's possession. This may mean reserving the right to have the data changed, audited, or expunged at your request. And number 3, the school official may not redisclose that PII to any other individuals or organizations. In short, you make the rules for what they can do with the data, not the other way around. If they're serving an educational function, you have direct control, and they don't redisclose the data, then they're a school official. And there you have it, the 4 main exceptions to sharing student PII without parental consent. Now remember, this isn't an exhaustive list of all of the exceptions, so you should look into the other ones as well. I wanted to tell you about the other exceptions, but it's really cold. You'll also want to stay up to date with changes to federal and state law because it might affect how these exceptions work. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some other business to attend to. How long is this gonna go? No, hold still. Only I may dance. Second verse.